All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we are looking directly at the official MQL5 reference, specifically focusing on the mechanics of Chapter 20's trade functions. We're going to completely demystify these complex functions and help you build a bulletproof process for structuring the lifecycle of a single automated trade.
We've broken this down to follow the exact chronological life cycle of an automated trade. We'll start with automating your strategy, move into pre-trade calculations and checks, cover order execution, track those trade transactions, and finally wrap up with managing positions and history.
So let's kick things off with part 1, automating your trading strategy and the very high stakes of execution.
Algorithmic trading operates at just lightning speed. In MQL5, your expert advisors, your EAs, are designed to automatically calculate signals and fire trades straight to the broker's server. Zero human intervention. But because of that sheer speed, a poorly constructed trade request, that can instantly wipe out an account or trigger a brutal, endless wave of server rejections. We absolutely need a structured mental model to safely execute these operations without just blindly spamming the server.
So here's the crucial takeaway. Every single successful algorithmic trade follows an exact 3-step lifecycle. First, you calculate and check your parameters. Think of that as your pre-flight routine. Then, you actually execute the trade, which is liftoff. And finally, you track and manage the trade from mission control. Honestly, if you skip any of these steps, you are flying blind. Moving right along to part 2, pre-trade, calculate and check. This is all about calculating your fuel and destination. Before we even think about launching a trade, we've got to calculate the required fuel and figure out our target destination. MQL5 gives us 2 essential functions for this. First up is OrderCalcMargin. This calculates the exact margin you need for your specific order type and volume, returning it in your account's currency. Next, we have OrderCalcProfit, which projects your floating profit based on your intended entry and exit prices. These calculation functions, they're your safety net. They make sure your trading robot actually has the financial runway to pull off the maneuver before attempting it. Okay, so once you've done that initial math, you pack your proposed trade into a request and hand it over to the OrderCheck function. OrderCheck is amazing. It essentially simulates the trade on the server and fills out this MQL trade check results structure. It tells you exactly what your balance, required margin, and free margin will look like after the trade. Plus, it gives you a RET code, a return code, indicating flat out if the server would accept or reject this maneuver. By running your trade request through OrderCheck first, you know exactly what the server's response is going to be before you ever risk a live execution. Verify before you execute. I cannot stress this enough. This is absolutely critical. Because if your EA repeatedly fires off invalid requests, like trying to trade without enough free margin, the broker's server might just block your application entirely. Which brings us to part 3, execution. Sending the order. We are officially preparing for liftoff. Now that all our pre-flight checks are green, it's time to launch. You pack every single mission parameter into the MQL trade request data structure. This is basically your payload going to the server. And what's really interesting here is the absolute precision required. You have to define the action, like trade action deal for immediate execution. You need the specific symbol, the volume in lots, your intended price, and the exact type of order, like order type buy. Every single variable must be strictly defined. So how do we actually send that payload? You basically have 2 distinct launch mechanisms. OrderSend is for synchronous execution. When you call this, your EA literally hits pause and waits for the server to reply with an MQL trade result response. It's methodical, safe, and highly recommended for your standard bots. But then, you have OrderSendAsync for asynchronous execution. This fires off the request and immediately hands control back to your EA. No waiting around. It's a true fire and forget method, which is absolutely essential for high-frequency trading where literally every millisecond counts. But that brings up a really crucial question. Your order is sent, the payload was delivered, but how do you actually know what the server did with it? Did it fill completely? Partially? Did you get slippage? Once that order is out there in the wild market, the environment completely changes, and we have to start listening for the server's echoes. And that leads us right into part 4, tracking trade transactions. Welcome to Mission Control. To monitor the heartbeat of the server, MQL5 relies on a specialized event handler called onTradeTransaction. Think of this as the central nervous system for your EA. Anytime the state of your trading account shifts, the terminal generates a trade event.
Your script catches this event using the on-trade transaction function, and it receives an incredibly detailed MQL trade transaction structure that breaks down exactly what just happened. Now, here's a kind of wild technical constraint straight from the reference. The terminal actually queues up to 1,024 of these transactions. That's your maximum queue length. What does that mean for you? Well, your algorithm needs to process them efficiently. If your on-trade transaction handler takes too long, the oldest transactions in that 1,024 element queue could literally get overwritten and superseded by new ones. If that happens, your EA loses track of reality. Your mission control monitors all these crucial telemetry events. On-trade transaction catches everything. When a request is handled, when open orders change, updates to your order history, deal history, or open positions. Oh, and remember OrderSendAsync? If you use that blazing fast asynchronous launch, on-trade transaction is where you catch the final execution result. You use it to tie that asynchronous request back to reality using a unique identifier called the request ID. Finally, let's wrap up the life cycle with Part 5, Managing Positions and History, Reviewing the Logs. The life cycle really ends with managing the ongoing mission. For active positions, MQL5 uses a very specific flow. First, you check how many positions are actually open using positions total. Then, you loop through them using position get ticket to select a specific one. Once you've got it selected, you use functions like position get integer or position get double to read live data, things like the magic number, current volume, or the active stop loss. This is the magic that lets your strategy dynamically trail stops or bail out of trades when the market shifts. And what about when we want to look backward? If you're analyzing past performance or checking if a recent trade was profitable, you have to interact with the history database. But there is a strict rule here. You can't just pull history out of thin air. Querying the database first is non-negotiable. You must always call HistorySelect to request a specific time period. Only after calling HistorySelect can you use History Orders Total to see how many records exist, and then History Order Get Ticket to actually pull and review those past logs. So we've successfully tracked a trade from its very first margin calculation all the way to its final resting place in the history logs. You now really understand the heartbeat of MQL5 trade functions, from the synchronous safety of OrderSend to the complex asynchronous tracking inside on-trade transaction. But remember, the code? It's just the vehicle for your ideas. You now have the tools to execute flawlessly. So the question I'll leave you with today is this: what market inefficiency are you going to automate next?